Fall of the Qing dynasty, century of humiliation, Opium Wars, First Sino-Japanese War, and Boxer Rebellion. The Eight-Nation Alliance invaded China to defeat the anti-foreign Boxers and their Qing backers. The image shows a celebration ceremony inside the Chinese Imperial Palace, the Forbidden City, after the signing of the Boxer Protocol in 1901. In the mid-19th century, the Qing dynasty experienced Western imperialism in the Opium Wars with Britain and France. China was forced to pay compensation, open treaty ports, allow extraterritoriality for foreign nationals, and cede Hong Kong to the British, 83, under the 1842 Treaty of Nanking, the first of the unequal treaties. The First Sino-Japanese War, 1894-1895, resulted in Qing China's loss of influence in the Korean peninsula, as well as the cession of Taiwan to Japan. The Qing dynasty also began experiencing internal unrest, in which tens of millions of people died, especially in the White Lotus Rebellion, the failed Taiping Rebellion that ravaged southern China in the 1850s and 1860s, and the Dungan Revolt, 1862-1877, in the northwest. The initial success of the self-strengthening movement of the 1860s was frustrated by a series of military defeats in the 1880s and 1890s. In the 19th century, the Great Chinese Diaspora began. Losses due to emigration were added to by conflicts and catastrophes such as the Northern Chinese Famine of 1876-1879, in which between 9 and 13 million people died. The Guangxu Emperor drafted a reform plan in 1898 to establish a modern constitutional monarchy, but these plans were thwarted by the Empress Dowager Cixi. The ill-fated anti-foreign Boxer Rebellion of 1899-1901 further weakened the dynasty. Although Cixi sponsored a program of reforms, the Xinhai Revolution of 1911-1912 brought an end to the Qing dynasty and established the Republic of China. Pai, the last emperor of China, abdicated in 1912. Establishment of the Republic and World War I. Republic of China, 1912-1949, 1911 Revolution, Second Sino-Japanese War, Chinese Civil War, and Chinese Communist Revolution. Sun Yat-sen, the founding father of Republic of China, one of the first republics in Asia. On 1 January 1912, the Republic of China was established, and Sun Yat-sen of the Kuomintang, the KMT or Nationalist Party, was proclaimed provisional president on 12 February 1912. Regent Empress Dowager Longyu sealed the imperial abdication decree on behalf of 4-year-old Pai, the last emperor of China, ending 5,000 years of monarchy in China. In March 1912, the presidency was given to Yuan Shikai, a former Qing general who in 1915 proclaimed himself Emperor of China. In the face of popular condemnation and opposition from his own VA army, he was forced to abdicate and re-establish the Republic in 1916. After Yuan Shikai's death in 1916, China was politically fragmented. Its Beijing-based government was internationally recognized but virtually powerless. Regional warlords controlled most of its territory. In the late 1920s, the Kuomintang under Chiang Kai-shek, the then principal of the Republic of China Military Academy, was able to reunify the country under its own control with a series of deft military and political maneuverings, known collectively as the Northern Expedition. The Kuomintang moved the nation's capital to Nanjing and implemented political tutelage, an intermediate stage of political development outlined in Sun Yat-sen's San Minutes program for transforming China into a modern democratic state. The political division in China made it difficult for Chiang to battle the communist-led People's Liberation Army, PLA, against whom the Kuomintang had been warring since 1927 in the Chinese Civil War. This war continued successfully for the Kuomintang, especially after the PLA retreated in the Long March, until Japanese aggression and the 1936 Xi'an incident forced Chiang to confront Imperial Japan. Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong toasting together in 1945 following the end of World War I. The Second Sino-Japanese War, 1937-1945, a theater of World War I, forced an uneasy alliance between the Kuomintang and the Communists. Japanese forces committed numerous war atrocities against the civilian population. In all, as many as 20 million Chinese civilians died. An estimated 40,000 to 300,000 Chinese were massacred in the city of Nanjing alone during the Japanese occupation during the war. China, along with the UK, the United States, and the Soviet Union, were referred to as trusteeship of the powerful and were recognized as the Allied Big Four in the declaration by United Nations. Along with the other three great powers, China was one of the four major allies of World War II and was later considered one of the primary victors in the war. After the surrender of Japan in 1945, Taiwan, including the pescadores, was handed over to Chinese control. However, the validity of this handover is controversial in that whether Taiwan's sovereignty was legally transferred and whether China is a legitimate recipient, due to complex issues that arose from the handling of Japan's surrender, resulting in the unresolved political status of Taiwan, which is a flashpoint of potential war between China and Taiwan. China emerged victorious but war-ravaged and financially drained. The continued distrust between the Kuomintang and the Communists led to the resumption of civil war. Constitutional rule was established in 1947, but because of the ongoing unrest, many provisions of the ROC Constitution were never implemented in mainland China. Civil War and the People's Republic. History of the People's Republic of China. Chinese Soviet Republic. Proclamation of the People's Republic of China. Retreat of the government of the Republic of China to Taiwan. Taiwan, China, and Cultural Revolution. Mao Zedong proclaiming the establishment of the PRC in 1949. Before the existence of the People's Republic, the CCP had declared several areas of the country as the Chinese Soviet Republic, Jiangxi Soviet, a predecessor state to the PRC, in November 1931 in Rujin, Jiangxi. The Jiangxi Soviet was wiped out by the KMT armies in 1934 and was relocated to Yan'an in Shaanxi, where the Long March concluded in 1935. It would be the base of the Communists before major combat in the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949. Afterwards, the CCP gained control of most of mainland China, and the Kuomintang retreating offshore to Taiwan, reducing its territory to only Taiwan, Hainan, and their surrounding islands. On 1 October 1949, CCP Chairman Mao Zedong formally proclaimed the establishment of the People's Republic of China at the new nation's founding ceremony and inaugural military parade in Tiananmen Square, Beijing. In 1950, the People's Liberation Army captured Hainan from the ROC and incorporated Tibet. However, remaining Kuomintang forces continued to wage an insurgency in western China throughout the 1950s. The government consolidated its popularity among the peasants through land reform, which included the execution of between 1 and 2 million landlords. China developed an independent industrial system and its own nuclear weapons. The Chinese population increased from 550 million in 1950 to 900 million in 1974. However, the Great Leap Forward, an idealistic massive reform project, resulted in an estimated 15 to 35 million deaths between 1958 and 1961, mostly from starvation. In 1966, Mao and his allies launched the Cultural Revolution, sparking a decade of political recrimination and social upheaval that lasted until Mao's death in 1976. In October 1971, the PRC replaced the Republic of China in the United Nations and took its seat as a permanent member of the Security Council. This UN action also created the problem of the political status of Taiwan and the two Chinas issue. See Cross-Strait Relations and Taiwan, China. Reforms in Contemporary History. Chinese economic reform. The 1989 Tiananmen Square protests was ended by a military-led massacre which brought condemnations and sanctions against the Chinese government from various foreign countries. After Mao's death, the Gang of Four was quickly arrested by Yu Guofeng and held responsible for the excesses of the Cultural Revolution. Elder Deng Xiaoping took power in 1978 and instituted significant economic reforms. The CCP loosened governmental control over citizens' personal lives, and the communes were gradually disbanded in favor of working, contracted to households. This marked China's transition from a planned economy to a mixed economy with an increasingly open market environment. China adopted its current constitution on 4 December 1982. In 1989, the suppression of student, Protests in Tiananmen Square brought condemnations and sanctions against the Chinese government from various foreign countries. Jiang Zemin, Li Peng and Zhu Rongji led the nation in the 1990s. Under their administration, China's economic performance pulled an estimated, by whom? 150 million peasants out of poverty and sustained an average annual gross domestic product growth rate of 11.2%. Better source needed. British Hong Kong and Portuguese Macau returned to China in 1997 and 1999, respectively, as the Hong Kong and Macau special administrative regions under the principle of one country, two systems. The country joined the World Trade Organization in 2001 and maintained its high rate of economic growth under Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabeo's leadership in the 2000s. However, the growth also severely impacted the country's resources and environment and caused major social displacement. Chinese Communist Party General Secretary Xi Jinping has ruled since 2012 and has pursued large-scale efforts to reform China's economy, which has suffered from structural instabilities and slowing growth, and has also reformed the one-child policy and penal system, 130, as well as instituting a vast anti-corruption crackdown. In 2013, China initiated the Belt and Road Initiative, a global infrastructure investment project. The global COVID-19 pandemic originated in Wuhan and was first identified from an outbreak in December 2019. The Chinese government response has included a zero COVID strategy, making it one of few countries to pursue this approach. The country's economy continued to broaden recovery from the recession during the pandemic, with stable job creation and record international trade growth, although retail consumption was still slower than predicted. On 1 July 2021, the People's Republic of China celebrated the 100th anniversary of the establishment of the CCP, first of the two centenaries, with a huge gathering in Tiananmen Square and cultural artistic performance in Beijing National Stadium in Beijing.